In our previous lesson, we discussed the type of sources you can use to turn your opinions into facts. In this lesson, we will discuss ways to transfer your resources in your writing without committing plagiarism. So, what is plagiarism? I'm sure that you have already heard the term and you may have a general idea of what it is, but many students are unclear as to what exactly is considered plagiarism and what they can do to avoid it. So, plagiarism is using other people's words and ideas without an acknowledgement. In other words, without clearly mentioning the fact that what you write is not yours and it's not your original work. Here you may notice that the definition does not mean that you are not allowed to use any of the words or ideas that you see in the text at all. Of course, you can do it, however, there are some conditions that apply. And the condition is that you always mention that what you write belongs to someone else and direct the reader to the original text by providing what we call citations and quotes. Now, let's talk about ways to borrow someone else's words and ideas without plagiarizing. The most important are paraphrasing and citing, or quoting and citing. Paraphrasing is a very essential skill in writing and refers to the ability to retell or rewrite a text using your own words. There is no formula to paraphrase. It is a skill that develops with time as your language skills develop, but there are some tips that may help you in the process. First of all, you have to make sure you understand the text, and you have to look up any keywords you are seeing for the first time. You also have to look up synonyms to be able to paraphrase. Make sure you examine enough examples in a sentence. Some synonyms just do not fit with certain phrases, so make sure they collocate. After you've done these basic steps, you have to retell the text to yourself. Imagine that you're explaining to a friend, for example. And finally, you have to always compare your text to the original. Ask yourself the following questions. Does my version exactly convey the meaning of the original text? Did I cover all the main ideas? Is my version different enough from the original? And how? Remember here, paraphrasing is not changing only a few words, but keeping everything else exactly the same as the original, because this is still considered plagiarism if you don't change the phrasing enough. If you feel comfortable with the text, and of course, whenever it's possible, you should try maybe changing the structure of the original sentence. Or you should maybe try transferring ideas in a different order than the original text. When you write for academic purposes, it is very, very important to be able to show to the reader your personal writing style and your personal way to express ideas. And that's why you should always paraphrase. Paraphrasing is a skill that requires constant practice. Get used to doing it as a mental exercise with as many texts as you can. They don't even have to be long. A few sentences at a time will be enough. Be sure that with continuous practice, paraphrasing will start happening automatically. Now, let's look at some examples to help us clarify the topics that we mentioned before. Let's look at this sentence. There has been a dramatic increase in the number of Australian children taking an interest in cooking in the last 2 years. And the following sentence, researchers speculate that this may be due to the rising popularity of reality-based television cooking shows aimed at a young audience. So this is the original phrase that we have to paraphrase, basically. The text is two very clear sentences that talk about the rise of interest in cooking among Australian children due to the influence of popular cooking shows that target younger audiences. As you can see, straight away, by retelling the main ideas of this text, I naturally paraphrased it in a way that, of course, fits my own style. And you don't have to do it the same way, it won't look the same. So let's break down the process. Let's first identify phrases that can be changed. Instead of isolating individual words, we will try to change longer phrases or even a whole sentence. By doing this, you will avoid changing only a few words and, of course, committing the plagiarism that we talked about before in the process. This is an example. You can say something like, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of Australian children taking an interest in cooking in the last 2 years, which can be changed to something which means exactly the same, but it has a completely different phrasing. During the last 2 years, the number of Australian children interested in cooking has become much higher. As you can see, in this case, almost every word has changed from the original text, but the meaning is exactly the same. So, if you compare the two texts, you will notice that although they present exactly the same idea, it is clear that they have been written by two different people, because the style is different. This is exactly the goal when you paraphrase. Let's look at the second sentence. Researchers speculate that this may be due to the rising popularity of reality-based television cooking shows aimed at a young audience. And this can be paraphrased to look something like that. According to research, this might be because of the influence of popular cooking shows on television designed to attract younger audience. Similarly, the second sentence expresses exactly the same meaning, but with very different words. And as we said before, you can also experiment with changing the order with which the two ideas are presented. So you can say something like, according to some researchers, the popularity of television shows targeting younger viewers might explain the growing numbers of Australian children interested in cooking. So you can see that all versions of the text look very different from each other, but all of them express exactly the same meaning. Not two writings will look exactly the same, but that is what gives your personal touch and adds creativity to your writing. And this is what will give you those higher grades if you aim for them. Now, you also have to remember that paraphrasing is not summarizing. When you summarize, you present the whole text and not just bits and pieces of it. A summary tells you about the whole passage, and a summary is always shorter than the original text, usually half the size of the original text.